working day, and the topic of our next conference is ratification of the agreement concerning the credit agreement on the second loan of the Japan International Cooperation Agreement, and we are given the floor to Shigeki Sumi, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Japan to Ukraine, and Natalia Yaresko, Minister of Finances of Ukraine. Good morning, dear Mr. Ambassador. Your Highness, Mr. Ambassador of Japan, Ukraine has fruitful history of assistance and cooperation with Japan, and we already have received $1.85 billion US dollars from Japan, and I'm glad to say that Ukraine and Japan have ratified the agreement for the $300 million loan. Ukrainians have many months of debates whether we have reforms ongoing or not. At the same time, financial support of Ukraine by the third parties is the clear proof of the answer to this question that the governments of other countries would not have support our country if do not implement reforms. What are these reforms? The condition for this loan was for Ukraine to have completed 10 structural reforms. In particular, the first is to liquidate evasion of taxes and by way of monitoring of electronic administration of VAT and strengthening control over transfer pricing. And the second example, efficient mechanisms of combating siphoning of capital to offshores and efficient mechanism of monitoring both of revenues and expenditures of the budget. And the third example is unbundling of transportation, storage and production of gas and reforming of the gas market. We have conducted and implemented these reforms. They are real reforms. Possibly people would like to hear more about more reforms, but they reforms have not been completed during 23 years of independence, while our governments have completed these reforms within 15 months. These reforms are results of very complex, long and careful work for months, in which the ministries, governmental agencies, the National Bank and the Verkhovna Rada took part. This close cooperation between the governmental bodies and cooperations with the between the government and the Verkhovna Rada enable approval and implementation of the long-awaited reforms. Without international cooperations and reforms and support of other countries, we can't proceed with reforms. The loan about which we are talking today is a critical agreement. The term of this loan are as follows. The loan is for 20 years period with 6 years of grace period. The interest rate on the loan is LIBOR plus 0.05%, that is less than 1%. At the same time, commercial debt, which was received in 2014, the interest rate was 8%, and those money were provided for 5 years. So this $300 million of the US dollars which we will receive within this loan agreement, they will be filled to the general fund of the state budget of Ukraine, and they will help to finance priority needs of the country, including reforms and capital expenditures. So the effect of this loan will be felt by all general public of Ukraine. Besides that, when Ukraine will receive this money within the scope of this loan agreement upon ratification, I would like to thank the Japanese people and the government of Japan and Johannes Ambassador for financial support to your country, because this is a display of your faith into Ukraine, and we will proceed with reforms and continue our course.
Thank you, Minister Natalia Yaresko, and thank you very much for coming to this press conference. Today, as Minister Natalia Yaresko announced the now ratification of the contribution of $300 million for the budgetary support is completed. So now, in due course of time, $300 million for budgetary support of Ukraine is coming to the Treasury. And since the Maidan 2 years ago, Japan has donated more than $1.85 billion for assisting Ukraine. And then I'm very glad, and the Japanese government is very glad to see that many reforms, some of them the Minister Natalia Yaresko mentions, are on the right track and making big progress. That's why Japan believes that this assistance, which we made announcement, is very important for get the Ukrainian government continue to this reform. Because as I said, now it's critically important time for the government and the people of Ukraine. Because since Maidan, a lot of reform is being made, a lot of change of legislations and the law and the legal system is already done. But now both Japanese government and the people of Ukraine should work together is how to implement this reform. That's why I said that it is very, very critical moment for both the government of Japan, and which making a huge contribution to the people of Ukraine, and then for the people and the government of Ukraine. And the good news is economic fundamentals in Ukraine is not that bad as some people do portray, because if you look at the reserve, it's got a great improvement since last year, and also the economic development. If you look at the figure of last year, this year's figure is much better. And as a matter of fact, since Maidan, there are 3 big Japanese business who came to Ukraine for investment. Of course, as you know, Yazaki and Fujikura and Sumitomo Electrics. These 3 companies are already starting the factory operation either last year or this year. That shows that, you know, the business people in Japan started to show confidence in the, you know, the future Ukrainian economies. So just I'd like to tell you that Ukrainian economic fundamental is not that bad. And on top of that, today I'm very glad to have Mr. Tanaka who is our the government financial advisor to Minister Natalia. He's a real expert in the area of the banking clearance. How can I say, technical issues. So he's here to help the cleaning up the banking system in Ukraine. That also shows that the Japanese government is not just providing the financial assistance, but expertise. So I'm very glad to see him here today. But anyway, thank you very much. And the reason, again, I wanted to have this press conference is that the Japanese government has a confidence in the people and the government of Ukraine for making a great reform efforts. Thank you very much. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. We have time for 4 questions. Please ask. Please introduce yourself first. And in 2012, Japan, in 2011, in the framework of Kyoto Protocol, Japan gave the money for the reconstruction of incinerator plant, and in the framework of this loan, there will be a renovation in Bortnichi sewage treatment plant. This credit has nothing to do with this plant. This was 1 billion that was already mentioned before, and this loan is for reforms. These reforms that were implemented, and before this credit were no other conditions. We did everything we had to do, and as to Bortnichi sewage treatment station, the provision of this funds, it is done step by step. It's not in a month, in a year. This is a huge work that will be carried out for several years, and step by step, this money will be provided. This money, they are not in Ukraine. They are provided when the works are completed. And also, I would like to give the floor to my colleague. Yes.
Yes, what the Minister Natalia said is right. This is not the part of Kyoto Protocol project. This is a new project which has been discussing for some time. And June last year, when the Japanese Prime Minister came to Ukraine for the first time as a prime minister, we signed the MOU between the government of Ukraine and the government of Japan. And this is a big project, 1 billion project. So of course, it takes really 5-6 years before the completion. And already the feasibility study has started, and the team was here to look at how the project should be carried out. So I think everything's under control. I hope that real construction work will start by next year or so that in 5-6 years all projects will be completed. So money-wise, so the money is not come in one time. By looking at the progress of project, the money coming from Japan to Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Я просто добавлю, тому що питання було задано таким.
So the question was asked in a manner that there were some governments, you remember previous governments, they didn't use the funds they had, or they didn't use them completely, those funds that were provided by other states. And we solved these issues by some humanitarian help that was provided to Kharkiv theater. This help was provided by Japanese government, and these money were not invested. So this government, our government, we came to power, and we now do everything possible in order to correct the situation, and we should not only implement and sign some treaties, because every money is vital for us, and we see that first we should show that we have some results, and we should have professionalism. Professionalism, for example, in Bortnichi, this is not the work of the government. This is work of Bortnichi sewage treatment station. They should show results in the work, and the professionalism should be present everywhere, in every institution, in all institutions, and our partners are ready to help us in this. Next question, please. ICTV TV channel. I have a question about IMF. What is the news, and when the memorandum will be renewed, and what is the analysis of the situation? It is a question to Natalia Yaresko. What is the situation? What is the current situation? Nothing has changed. We have a memorandum that is renewed every 2 weeks, and the situation, I can tell you, I try to tell everyone that this is a live document, and every week something changes. And Верховна Rada, they supported 2 draft laws that were in memorandum, but these were on improvement of governance in state enterprises, corporate government and state enterprises. And the second draft law was on privatization. And after this, we renewed and made some changes. And the situation is alive, and the memorandum is discussed, and there are no big problems, but we should communicate and reach our goals, because the situation changes and the memorandum changes as well every week. You should understand this. So I don't envisage a lot of problems here. And where will be a tranche? There should be some process, then there should be a meeting of board of directors, and once they should sign a memorandum, and then they will establish a date. They can establish this date in some time, so they go step by step. They follow some procedures, and we should define the main issues, and then we will conduct the meeting, and then will be the meeting of the board of directors there, and then they will allocate a tranche. Shelling 100 channel Ukraine. The Ministry of Finance appealed to the court in London on the credit of Yanukovych, and your ministry, they addressed to the court that they will reject this claim. And what will be the defense of Ukraine in the court, how it will be presented? And there's no public opinion on that now. This is a work that we won't tell you about now. We will work in the interest of Ukraine in order to defend the interests of Ukraine. And the last question. Good afternoon, RBK Ukraine, and I have the question to Mr. Ambassador about Kyoto money. And we remember that the government signed the decree on the returning of money of $11 million, and in the Ministry of Ecology they told that at the end of 2015 some tenders were cancelled as to on the sum of 800,000 hryvnias, and we didn't use this money, and we had to use this money, and now negotiations are on the way with the Japanese side whether these funds should be returned. And should Ukraine return this money, or should it retain this money?
There are two issues. One is the government-to-government agreement and the private sector to Ukrainian government agreement. I'm not so sure which you discussed, but with regard to the government-to-government, it is true that a few $1 million back to the government of Japan, but it's about the 4 million. And then, as you know, Kyoto Protocol itself, government to government, is more than 200 million dollars already donated, and $200 million are already utilized. The reason the $3-4 million should return to the government of Japan is that there are because Kyoto Protocol, as you know, the government or the Japanese government donated 1,500 police cars and 120 KF metal trains, and also other so-called health facilities we carried out. But at the end, there are certain money which, for example, finally a little bit technical, but we discussed because some money we found it's not used. So we discussed the government how the rest of money around to $50 million, whether how do we spend this money. And we came up with the idea that out of 15, the 11 could be utilized for purchasing a new train, metro train. But of course, one train costs about 5 million. So if you have 3 train, then that costs 15 million. So out of 20, we don't know how to use the rest of 2 or 3 million. That's why that money was returned to the Japanese government, because again, Kyoto Protocol has to be concluded by March this year. It's a legal, the framework. And then, so as I said, that out of, we could not find any project. The rest, compared to 200, 300, it's small portion, 300 million. We agreed to get it back to the government of Japan. That's what happened. Thank you.
Дякую, пан посол, дякую, пані міністр. На цьому ми завершуємо прес-конференцію. Успіхів вам і до зустрічі.
So we end our press conference. Until the next time, goodbye.